So, with the dawn of Ragnarok coming up, there's no better time to talk about this game, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. What's good about the game, and what's wrong with it, and how is it an example of Ubisoft's development that will eventually turn away a large majority of the player base? So, just a heads up, I want to say at the start of the video, I don't hate the game, just the production decisions. I quite enjoyed the gameplay and the game itself, so please watch through the end, and if you disagree, please let me know in the comments. And I want to keep this stuff going, keep the videos coming up, so please like and subscribe. It will really help me out. So, a few days ago, I got COVID. Yeah, that's right, I got the big Rona. And so I was stuck in my room for 7 days by myself, and I needed something to do. That's right, I took this opportunity to get the Platinum Trophy for The Last of Us Part 2. Great game, except for the ending, that's not that good. But after that, that's when I set my mind to getting the Platinum for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Don't worry, I got it. I actually got it twice. Thank you, PlayStation 5 upgrades. Now, I didn't play this game in its entirety in 7 days. I don't even think I could do that. The plat took roughly 115 hours of in-game time to achieve. I'd already finished the game, but I hadn't done much beyond finishing the main story and defeating all the cult members. The main story in this game takes roughly 70 hours, and clearing everything else beyond that took me an extra 40. Now, that sounds like agony, and trust me, it was. But this also leads into the first point I want to make about the game. It's just so goddamn long, and for no real reason. In my opinion, this game is about 40 hours longer than it should be. And by that, I mean the story. This is entirely due to the story. In a brief recounting of the story, Eivor leaves Norway to follow her brother's dream to settle and rule their own kingdom in England, amongst other motivations such as Sigurd's desire to realize he's a god. Eivor leaves Norway, and that marks the end of the prelude. But then the real beginning of the story starts. Once in England, Eivor is sent to neighbouring regions to gather allies. Then, Eivor meets with Sigurd, who becomes somewhat lost in his ambitions to prove that he is a god. After you finish a few more regions, the story progresses and Sigurd is captured by Fulki, who is a member of this game's cult. Because, there has to be a cult in every Assassin's Creed game now. Once Sigurd is captured, you have to complete several regions to finally capture Fulki. You can rescue Sigurd, but he only has one arm and seems quite detached from reality. After you rescue Sigurd, you'd think the story would progress quite rapidly, right? Nope. You have to clear a few more regions before you're actually able to pursue any story of Sigurd. There's no significant story reason as to why you need to wait. Sigurd just doesn't want to talk. So you need to complete most of the regions in England before you can complete the last story segment of the game. The lore it provides in this game relates to the first civilization, yet as you find the ancient machine, Sigurd believes that it's a portal of Valhalla, but it's actually just a machine that puts the characters into the Matrix. It's a Matrix machine. That's not an insult, it's just the closest description I have. It puts them into like a simulation of sorts and keeps them alive in the process. Whilst in the Matrix, Eivor and Sigurd believe they're in Valhalla and they battle every day, while Sigurd begins each day with both arms, but always loses one during the battle. Eivor is always victorious in battle, but when she realizes it's a simulation, she gets distracted, and her eye gets shot out with an arrow. Is this foreshadowing? Yeah, of course it is. Once you escape from the Matrix machine, Eivor fights that vision of Odin that has been pestering her all game. She breaks free of the Matrix, and they both try to escape the cave with the machine in it. However, they're ambushed by Basim. Basim attacks Eivor and tries to kill her. Basim is a companion of Sigurd's, who is leading them through the game on his travels in England. Although he seems innocent enough at first and quite cooperative through the game, it's revealed he was manipulating Sigurd and using him for his own reasons. Eivor defeats Basim and traps him in the Matrix machine. The game then flashes forward to the present, where the girl who's controlling the animas to look at Eivor has to venture into the cave to turn off the Matrix machine because it's in the cave and it's disrupting the Earth's magnetic core. But the cave is also full of lava, so you need the trident from the last game to stay alive. But it's also the trap set by Basim, who managed to calculate all of this while he was in the Matrix machine for a very long time. As the machine has kept him alive, he's able to use the trident prolong his life when the girl enters the machine and he is able to escape. The girl eventually meets this unnamed shadow figure, but it's definitely Desmond. It sounds exactly like Desmond. So they try to calculate a way to save the world inside the machine. Now, that's a lot to take in, especially if you haven't played the game and you only heard that weird description of mine. But what you should notice about the game is a very brief explanation of the story is that it's some damn cool lore. Really well written story beats in this game, and they definitely need to be explored. But there is just so much filler in the game that nobody wants to get to it. They get bored trying to finish all these regions and they play a different game. My main question is, why are there so many regions filled with such forgettable characters that you need to help? Like, I remember several of the characters, but most of them die during their own storylines. It's not really worth doing if you just forget about it and like, oh hey, they pop up again every now and again, but then you just like, who are you? Especially if you like take gaps in between like playing the game. You only really remember it if you just play in one long stretch. Towards the end of the game, the leaders from each region will assist you in the final battle against the leaders of the cult, even though that mission isn't memorable because it's just another castle raid. So what's the point again? This game is mostly filler, and if you're one of the people who managed to make it up to the 30-hour mark, you really begin to feel it. I played this game on easy just to get through everything as quick as possible, and it still took 70 hours. It doesn't speed it up. There's just so much. Is there a point to everything in the game though? Is there a reason the game was made 70 hours long by Ubisoft? No, there's no real significant story reason as to why it needs to be 70 hours long, and the game isn't exciting enough to make it a compelling 70 hours. At this point, they're relying on the faith of the players who have played the series up until this point. A 70-hour slog is not an inviting game, and there is nothing to hold the player in the game. It's almost intimidating to new players of the series who think the concept of Vikings is cool, but then like, 70 hours, this is, maybe not. I mean, look, sure, the landscapes are pretty and there are collectibles throughout the map, but is that enough? The game does not have the sheer majesty of something like Skyrim with seemingly limitless possibilities, and it doesn't have the magical whimsy of a game such as Witcher 3. These are two games that can capture their audience on their first missions and have players just explore their own worlds and have barely progressed in the story. Some people play these games to get through the first few missions and then just don't even worry about it. As for story detail, the density of this game does not warrant the length of the story. It's merely attributed to an expansive map that feels way too big and it slows down gameplay. The majority of the story is filler. There's no way to put it other than that. It's not good writing to design a story that is mostly filler to bump up playtime. Compare this to the Ezio games. Each story may have been something like 15 to 25 hours or a little more. The stories were packed, exciting, and always had you moving on to the next task. It was simpler story writing, it was more plot focused, and it was more compelling. If you take Brotherhood for an example, the story takes Cesare stealing the apple at the start of the game, and then attacking Ezio's home. He needs to escape to Italy to form the Brotherhood. The chapters follow Ezio's story throughout the game, with him completing missions to build the Brotherhood, with his companions in the region, but also seeking out Cesare. The story has very little filler as it's task focused. The game has also the collectibles, but each side quest allows the player to explore the game more. But the most important thing about this game is that it has charm. Lately, many people have been saying that the Assassin's Creed games have not been memorable at all. That could just be attributed to the filler in the stories and the lack of personalities that get swallowed up in the filler in the game. If you don't remember the game because you were so bored during it, then why would you remember the assassin? Another aspect I wanted to talk about was this cool foreshadowing that I mentioned earlier. This is when Sigurd kept losing his arm, and Eivor got an arrow in her eye. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is set in Norway during the Viking era, and the Vikings worshipped the Norse gods such as Odin and Tyr. That makes sense. Throughout the game, Eivor is pestered by this version of Odin telling her what to do and what decisions to make. One may put it down as a representation of her thought process, or maybe you think it's actually Odin speaking to her. Well, it's not Odin, because Odin's canonically dead, but, more on that later. The Norse gods actually existed in this world, and they have since been reincarnated. Eivor is Odin, Sigurd is Tyr, a character you meet later in the game is Thor. I don't really remember what his name is, but he held a hammer and he had a beard, so it wasn't too hard to figure out. During the game, there is also a mission where Eivor uses the seer to have a vision. Eivor appears in Asgard as Havi, who is, well, they're actually Odin, but they just call him Havi. Asgard is visually stunning, and it's got its own world to explore. It has a region questline such as the other regions do, and there's also a secondary area of Jotunheim that's unlocked as the same way that you would get the Asgard quests. When completing these quests, something may feel a little off with the characters. It's as if they seem familiar, but they're also vastly different. Never to worry, it's not a cheap casting crew where all the voice actors are made to voice like 6 different people. As mentioned before, the main characters of the game are actually reincarnations of the Norse gods. It's an interesting questline that actually gives an indication of certain characters and how the stories will end. It's also not the only foreshadowing of the game. At the start of the game, Eivor visits the seer and she follows Sigurd and an unseen man who eventually meets a giant black wolf. This man is Basim, and if you're paying attention, it's the game telling us that he is Loki right at the start. But the disappointing aspect about this is that the vision is at the start of the game before all the filler. It's too far away and it's already been forgotten. The big build-up that has been written in the game fizzles out because the player forgot about it 50 hours ago. But another issue with this is it's all in an optional questline. There is no requirement for the player to go to Asgard, and then the player misses out on one of the best moments in the game. But in the same vein, who really cares at that point? It doesn't seem relevant to the story, so the player will ignore it. When the game throws you into Asgard, it feels exactly like a side quest, and that's diverting you away from the main game. But even this isn't the most hidden away story element. But before I move on to all of that, I want to talk about the world cluttering in the game. When talking about the story, I mentioned that it was 70 hours in length, and that it took me another 40 hours to achieve the Platinum Trophy. The main barrier to the Platinum Trophy is the trophy for completing all the tasks in the game. This includes every world event, finding treasure, and completing any extra tasks such as finding lost artifacts. It took 40 odd hours because there is a grand total of 700 of these activities combined. The most frustrating with the world events, these are singular quests completed for NPCs around the map, which are usually small tasks. Some are easy, like rescue an animal from a burning building, but some are vague and intentionally puzzling. My main question is, why? Why are these in the game? Why so many? The only reason I could think of was to stretch out the playtime. Most of these aren't necessary and provide no real benefit to the player except for, getting some small XP. None of these resulted in anything meaningful, and several hundred, only a few are memorable. For people who aren't completionists, there is no reason to do any of these, and the game is so generous with XP normally that hunting for it is not really necessary. If anything, it's just a waste of development time. There are so many side quests and collectibles that many of these players will just ignore these. There is no immediate reward, most are frustrating, and none of it is fun. If anything, it's a relief when you come across one that is easy to get. Considering my plat run after the main story took 40 hours, trust me when I say all I wanted to do was take these out as quick as possible. There is so much to collect. Collecting all the treasure and events was tedious and repetitious. They were all the same except for a few unique ones sprinkled across the map. But completing hundreds of the same task is maddening, and it made me question my own sanity at certain points. Whilst writing the script, I regret finishing it, but I needed something to play when Elden Ring was days from releasing. But there was one unique event in the game. During the game, you may find an area of map that is glitching. Obviously, it's the devs doing a bad job, right? No, it's an animus anomaly. It presents as an obstacle course jump puzzle that you need to ascend to receive a small fragment of a clip. When you complete all of these puzzles, you receive the entire clip. This is the only challenge that has a meaningful reward. The clip is a memory of the Norse gods. However, they appear more akin to the first civilization than to traditional depictions of the Norse gods. The clip shows the Norse gods preparing a way to reincarnate themselves by implanting their DNA into some fetuses. This is their way to move into the future without Loki following. However, Loki is able to find a way to infiltrate the operation and also reincarnate along with them. This is a great piece of lore and it's great writing. It's a strong way to incorporate mythology into the first civilization lore. However, it's hidden behind a task that barely anybody will want to complete. The puzzles aren't revealed by a special marker on the map, they're just indicated by a white dot. However, there are several hundred white dots, as the white dot could be a world event, a puzzle, or just a regular collectible. By doing this, the game discourages exploring because the player is overwhelmed with how much exploring there is in this game, and that it's just easier to watch the clip on the internet. The satisfaction of finding it themselves does not exist, as they would either need to examine almost every dot on the map or use a guide. Either way, it does not provide that sense of accomplishment and defeats the whole purpose of it. There is more I could go into with all this, such as there are so many commands for each of the buttons that sometimes you try to do one action but the game does something else. It's like when Final Fantasy 15 had the jump and interact button be the same. Fun days. I could also say that the free running system has become so refined that you can jump onto anything that the game always seems to jump onto the wrong thing. However, issues with wall climbing and jumping has been synonymous with Assassin's Creed games since the first one was released. In conclusion, Assassin's Creed feels like a corporate creation, a game that has been produced and created to fit to a formula. There is no soul in the game, and it's not memorable at all. The story drags on for way too long and repeats the same story beats. The story is stretched so thin that it may not even be there. Not to mention the player is overwhelmed by a map that is bigger and not what is considered necessary. The game feels like what a company can do to drag out playtime, and added a bunch of side quests and story chapters to the point of gratuity. This game could be cut down to 30 hours to complete the story and all the main themes will be covered. It would just mean that several regions have been cut out. A more fast-paced story would make the game more engaging. Games don't need to be 70 hours long, and when they do, they shouldn't mostly be filler. This is a game that signifies what the rest of the games are going to look like. And I've played each game of the series since the first one, and I have the Platinum Trophy on each game except the ones that needed multiplayer tree. If the series is going to continue in this direction, then this is where I take my leave from the game. It's been a good run, but I don't see it changing anytime soon. The game is well made, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's just too much filler, and it significantly hurts the gameplay experience. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'm sorry if you're an Assassin's Creed fan and this annoys you. Trust me, I'm an Assassin's Creed fan too, and it annoys me. I don't like the way these games are going, and if you enjoyed the game, then good for you. I'm glad you enjoyed it and had a great time with it, but this is kind of the end of Assassin's Creed for me unless it drastically changes. But regardless, if you didn't agree with me, please leave a comment and tell me why not, and please give me a detailed reason. Don't just say you're wrong. I want to actually know what people enjoy about this game, because I shotgunned like 115 hours of it and it kind of all washes away. But if you want to see more discussions about video games and other topics that I'm interested in, TV, movies, and just internet culture, please subscribe, like the video for more, and I will see you next time. Bye.